Hi, my name is David Vasquez-Calero, and for 44 of the last 46 years, I truly believed that the Jehovah's Witnesses was God's people on earth. I truly believed it. But today, I've walked away from the Jehovah's Witnesses. It took me about 18 months to get over the hump. But I'm not going to talk about that today. What I want to talk about, what mental state was I in when I became one of Jehovah's Witnesses, when I started to listen to them. And that goes back to when I was a kid. See, I was born to a Catholic family. And at the age of 5, I went to Catholic school. To me, Catholic school was a horror show. The principal in my school, Sister Gertrude, would have been ideal for American Horror Stories. I got a story about her. But I also have a story about the school itself. You felt that you had to be looking forward all the time and your hands folded. And then there were nuns that would scream all the time. And I used to say to myself, this is God's organization here? Is this God's church? Anyway, there was another nun, Sister Benedicta. Sister Benedicta would have the lunch class practically in total silence. Here you are in the cafeteria. You want to eat your food. You want to talk. You want to feel free. And you have a nun that you couldn't talk above a whisper. And then I want to tell you this little experience that I had with Sister Gertrude. I was either in the 3rd or 4th grade. Now think about this. 3rd or 4th grade. When I'm told to go to the principal's office to take a test so that I could qualify for communion and confirmation. About 10 boys from different classes showed up. One of them was a kid named Joseph. He was a buddy of mine. He lived right across the hallway in the apartment house that we lived in. So I was kind of lucky. It was a 17-question exam, and all you really had to do was answer one question correctly, and you was in. So here comes my turn. Sister Gertrude says, "What's the 5th commandment of God?" Boy, I felt relief. I knew the answer. Thou shalt not kill. 3 boys down from me was Joseph. And I could catch him from the corner of my eye. He was a little bit frozen in time. And the principal asked him, "What's the 8th commandment of God?" Not only was he frozen in time, he was vegetating. It broke my heart to look at him. He was either clueless or just frozen. So the principal asked him a second time, "What's the 8th commandment of God?" And I could catch him from the corner of my eye. And I completely felt my heart was crying for him. My heart was bleeding for him. Sister Gertrude was about 5 feet, she was about 4 feet, 8 inches tall. She wasn't much taller than the kids in that room, in her office. She looked like a bulldog. And I don't mean to be offensive in this. I don't mean to offend any Catholic, any Jehovah's Witness, anybody that belongs to any religion, but I'm just telling you my experience. This principal had a face of a bulldog. She was mean, never had a smile, never saw her smile in 5 years. And I could see that her red face was turning purple as Joseph just froze. He couldn't answer the question. The principal got up. And what she did next, I couldn't believe. She asked him one more time, "Joseph, what's the 8th commandment of God?" This time her face is purple. The demon was ready to jump on this kid. I didn't want to look. I just knew that something was going to happen, but I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I'm in the Catholic school. This nun's supposed to know Jesus more than me. When that woman reared back and smacked that boy like to knock him out. It wasn't a smack like this. It was like a bam. I hear this loud sound. I said, "Oh my God." That was his last day in school. I told my mother when I went home what happened. And the following day, when I came home, my mother says, Joseph's mother went to school. And from what I understand, they had to keep her back because she wanted to jump on that nun and give her a whipping. That nun deserved the woman. In today's world, the school would have been sued. The nun would have been sent to purgatory, maybe hell, because what she did was a crime. I was tired of that. I told my mother after the 5th grade, I'm tired of this. Mom, I want to go to public school. So I went to public school. In public school, there was discipline. You felt like you wanted to participate in class. You didn't feel like you had to be stiff, not able to look to your left or right because they'll scream at you. And that's the way it was. Now, I can't speak for the kids that went to St. Ambrose or St. John's or any other Catholic school. I could only speak to you about the school that I went to and the miserable 5 years that I spent in that school. Well, my first grade teacher was a wonderful teacher, Sister Maria. She loved me, and I loved her, and I did well in her class. Public school was great. So now, from the age of 10 to 13, I didn't go to school. I didn't go to church. My mother used to go to the Spanish church. And one day, my cousin, Frank Hernandez, tells me, hey, Dave, I'm going to join the Colombian Squires. The Colombian Squires was the junior organization of the Night of Columbus. So I said, I'll join too. So we became squires at Montserrat Mission Chapel. It was a Spanish chapel. The priests did speak English, but they spoke to the members of the congregation in Spanish. Most of the people were Spanish there. And from the age of 13 to about the age of 17, 18, I had a wonderful time attending this church. Father Sebastian was slim, good looking, and he was like a brother to the squires. And the squires were a bunch of nice kids. No bopping, no juvenile delinquents. We were all straight A kids, and the parents were great kids. But even at that church, I started to notice things that drove me away from the Roman Catholic Church. See, I started to notice that in my conversations with Father Sebastian, one day I was talking to him about evolution. And I asked him, was Adam and Eve beautiful and perfect, or were they primitive? He elected to say they were primitive. That went one ear, out the other. I said, I didn't believe in evolution. I knew the teachings because they would teach me that in school. I would see the films and, in evolution, they teach you that this book evolved into this book. That's how they teach evolution. Hey, this book evolved into this book. They don't tell you how it evolves. They try, but it's a miserable explanation. So I'm saying to myself, wow, this priest believes in evolution. All right. Another time, I was a little bit upset because teenagers used to smoke cigarettes, and they could sell you cigarettes as a teenager back in the 1960s. And I'm on my way to church, and I bought a pack of cigarettes. And I'm reading the package, and it says, cigarette smoking could be detrimental to your health. I said, wow. After they hook you on the cigarettes, now they're telling you that you could get sick. So one day, once again, Father Sebastian was with the fellas, and we were talking. There was a lot of energy in that room that day. It was a good day. And Father Sebastian always had a smile. He was a good man. And but I had a moment with him, and I asked him, Father, how come the Catholic Church, how come the Pope doesn't denounce cigarette smoking? Technically, cigarette smoking is going to kill you sooner or later. That's suicide. Why doesn't he denounce it? And you know, when a person doesn't have an answer, he made eye contact with me as I was asking him the question. Then he took away the eye contact. And then he looked at me again, and he did what most people do when they don't have an answer. Their body does a weird, I don't know if you ever noticed that, but I've noticed that a lot of times. The body does like a weird motion, like, So that's all I needed. That's all I needed. He didn't have an answer. And I knew why he didn't have an answer. Because by the time I was 17 years old, I knew that the Roman Catholic Church was in bed with all the political leaders in this world. Back then and today. In fact, today's Pope is a globalist. But that's a story for another day. So now here I am. I'm 17, and I'm losing my faith. And then one day I'm going to confession. I used to confess my sins at a church by the name of St. Ambrose. St. Ambrose was a big church. By the way, I went to All Saints Elementary School. All Saints was a magnificent church. Magnificent. It was beautiful. And when you would walk into that church, when you would walk into that church, and the stained glass all around the church on a beautiful Sunday morning, it felt heavenly. It really felt great. Anyway, Montserrat Mission Chapel was about a tenth of the size of that church, All Saints. St. Ambrose was also a very big church. And I would go there for confessions because I didn't want Father Sebastian or Father Conyena or Father Mass to be listening to my sins. They knew me. I was their friend. They knew my voice. So I would go to St. Ambrose. So I'm on my way to St. Ambrose. It's a spring day. It's still dark outside. It's dark. It's about 6:30. It was dark outside. When I walked into the church, the lights were dim. You could see the candles flickering. I used to like that about Catholic churches. There was something about the mood. But anyway, I go into the confession box. And all of a sudden, inside the confession box, I'm not confessing my sins to the priest. I went through the spiel. No, not the spiel. The routine. I went through the routine. I knelt down. The Father pulls over the little sliding door. And I said, "Bless me, Father, for all my sins." My last confession was last Saturday. Instead of telling the priest my sins, I said to him, "Father, I come here every Saturday. I confess my sins. You forgive me. You give me penance. After I receive communion on Sunday, I go back to my sinning." And I come back here every Saturday, and it's a routine. But he knew what I was getting at. How do you break that routine? I mean, if you consider yourself a Christian, how do you break that routine? His answer to me was simple. "Oh, you need to gain self-control. You need to gain." That was his answer. That was his cure. That's like telling a junkie, you got to just stop taking drugs. Anyway, I walked up to the altar. It's a big church. I walk up to the altar, and I began the routine. I had 10 Hail Marys, 10 Our Fathers, and 1 act of contrition. So I began to say the Lord's Prayer, the Our Father. Halfway through the Lord's Prayer, I stopped, and I looked up. Of course, what I see is the ceiling, a very high ceiling. But it wasn't the ceiling that I was looking up. I wasn't looking up to the ceiling. I was looking up to God. And I said to God the same thing I told the priest. I said, "God, is this it? I sin all week. I come here on a Saturday. You forgive me. Or he forgives me. You give me penance. And then I go back into my routine after Sunday Mass." Now, God did not speak to me, but the answer came to my mind. And I replied, "I don't think so." right there, that moment, I was around 17 years of age. I got up and I knew that I was never, ever again walking into a Catholic church for any spiritual reasons. And as I'm walking out of the church, I'm thinking, and I looked up again as if I was speaking to Jesus Christ. And I said, Jesus, I've always associated the Roman Catholic Church with you. But if I don't believe in the Roman Catholic Church anymore, where does that put you? I walked out. I walked 4 short blocks back to Montserrat, and there was Father Sebastian with 2 of my buddies. We talked a little bit, and then I said to Father Sebastian, I'm not coming to this church no more. He looked at me and he said, why, David? And I said, because I don't believe God comes here. He paused for a second and he said, David, the day you find God, that's where you're going to worship. That's all he said. He wasn't talking about excommunication. He didn't say to me, oh, I got to talk to you. No, none of that. He didn't say, oh, we're going to have to shun you. None of that. We continue to be friends. I continue to be a Colombian squire, and I continue to participate in church activities. You know, the dances. Who's not going to participate in the dances and the bazaars? And I continue to talk to Father Sebastian as a friend. But my days as a Catholic had come to an end. Too many things that bother me. Why would I have to say 10 Our Fathers to God, one after another? What's wrong? He doesn't hear you the first time? Or why would a person say 50 Hail Marys? 50 Hail Marys. Repeating yourself over and over and again, that sounds a little ridiculous to me. But anyway, that was my conclusion with the Roman Catholic Church. It didn't mean that I didn't believe in God. It just meant that my search for God has just begun. And it was that way from the age of 17 to the age of 24. Here I am, I'm 17 years of age, and I've lost complete faith in the Roman Catholic Church. Now, because the Roman Catholic Church to me was the number one church on this planet, I was not interested in any other religion, any of the 40,000 denominations of Christianity. I wasn't. But I believed in God still. I just knew that I had to find him. Now, there was also something bugging me by the time I was 17. You notice that I did mention that I was a little disappointed that the Roman Catholic Church rubbed shoulders with the political system of things. I mean, one of the things that bothers me the most is that the Roman Catholic Church was rubbing shoulders with the Nazi party. I mean, how low can you go? But this is how I started to become what I call a political atheist. I was 13 years old. I'm in the 7th grade. And my friend Soldier Boy, that was his nickname, walks into the classroom and says, the president has been shot. The teacher in the classroom was so upset when Joseph said that his name also was Joseph. The teacher was so upset that he grabbed him by the arm and shook him. And Joseph, freed himself from the teacher and he said, the president has been shot. I'm not lying to you. And I'm sitting at, it was like, we were not sitting behind a desk. It was like bleacher seats inside the classroom. It was shop. It was a shop class, woodwork. So the teacher runs to the phone, calls the principal, inquires about, Kennedy being shot, and the principal didn't know anything about that. Joseph knew about it because he was in charge of the TVs in the school. A few minutes later, the principal makes an announcement. The president has been shot. I'm 70 years old, bro. It still bothers me. A few minutes after that, the principal says, the president is dead. I think there was silence in the world. I walked home. I was in another world in my mind. I went upstairs. I put on the TV. And all I could do is, cry. I cried every day. I'm 13, and I'm having this experience in life in America, the land of freedom, truth, liberty, and they assassinated the president. I think that was on a Friday. Over the next couple of days, I hear Oswald, the accused, say, I'm a patsy. I understood that 100% when I heard that. When I heard Oswald say that he was a patsy, I knew he might have been in it, he might have been set up, but for sure, Oswald did not pull the trigger. Now I'm thinking, if Oswald didn't pull the trigger, who pulled the trigger? I didn't know anything about a shadow government, but I sensed it back then at a young age of 13. I said, this is an assassination of a great man. I love Kennedy. Let me tell you something about Kennedy. I loved him. When he went to Berlin and he gave that speech, let them come to Berlin, I was so proud. All those German people, they loved him. They loved him in India. No matter where he went, they loved him. I loved him. My mother loved him. I think a lot of people that didn't vote for him also loved him by 1963. So my disbelief in government began. I'm a kid. I'm 13 years old. Now, my nickname as a teenager was Crazy Dave, but there was nothing crazy about what was up here. I was observant. I was a critical thinker. I think I was a critical thinker from day one, from the day I was born. And now, and you also have to understand that something else was beginning to happen after the assassination of John F. Kennedy. Not only do I don't believe in government, but there's a war. They're cooking up a war in Vietnam. And I see the war start to escalate. And I would be watching television, and I would start to see the names of all the young boys that were killed the boys. That's where they were. Look, I'm 70 years of age today. If you tell me a 18-year-old man died anywhere in the world, no, it's not an 18-year-old man. It's a boy that died. 19, 20. These are mature children that have died. These are mature sons and daughters that have died in a battlefield. And I see the numbers increasing every day. I say, oh my God, this is really good. It's getting out of hand. So Plus, now I'm reading a couple of political books, and I realize that liberty and justice for all is not for everybody. It's for those who say, yes, I'll go along. I'll believe what you say. I won't make any waves. And I was with all these other people that were protesting the war. Definitely. I got tired of seeing so many young Americans, Doug Jones, John Smith, David Gonzalez, dead. For what? And against who? See, Vietnam, the first time I heard about Vietnam, I was in my underwears. My little brother was in his underwears. And I remember the announcer say, there's a whole bunch of young men today. He was referring to maybe 15-year-olds who will one day find themselves in the battlefields of Vietnam. I said, what? What amazed me about Vietnam was this. This is a country that could not produce its own tanks, could not produce its own cannons, could not produce its own transportation trucks, could not produce a battleship, aircraft carrier, a jet. This country was in the 1800s. And I'm observing this like I said, I was born a critical thinker, and I'm observing this at the age of 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. This war is driving me crazy. We're fighting a primitive culture with modern weapons. So now comes, so now you know I'm anti-government, not anti-American. I love the American people. We got some good souls in this country. American people introduced the closest thing to freedom to the world, outside of the freedoms that God would one day give us all. But this was the closest country to freedom, freedom of speech, freedom of everything. So now it's 1972. This is the first year that I could vote. And George McGovern was running on a platform that within 30 days of taking office, he would end the Vietnam War. I said, this is a shoo-in. It's a shoo-in. Who's going to vote against this? And on election day in 1972, by the time I got home that evening, I heard on the radio that it was already projected that Richard Nixon had won in a landslide. That tore my heart out of my chest. I couldn't believe that people voted for a man that I knew was going to continue the war. I don't know if they knew it, but I knew it. I'm 22 years old. Back then, you had to be 21 to vote. So I couldn't vote when I was 18 back in 1968. So I'm home. My wife and I are driving home. My wife knows that I'm really upset. We lived in a real nice apartment on Cypress Avenue. And I'm really upset. I'm pacing back and forth. And I had an old King James version of the Bible. I still have that copy at home. It was an old Bible. It was given to a young man for Christmas in 1950. I don't know how my brother-in-law Benny got a hold of it, but Benny gave me that Bible. So here I am. I'm so upset that the American people voted for someone that I knew was going to continue the war. I go home and I just open up the Bible. I did one of these numbers. And the first verse that I read was this. We know we originate with God, but the whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one. My God, I couldn't believe what I was reading at that moment. I closed the Bible and I said to myself, David, if you could believe that verse for just 1 minute, you would know why the whole world is upside down. And the whole world is still upside down today. Now you know why I don't believe in religions at the age of 24. And I'm a total political atheist. I didn't believe in government at all. And believe me, I read a lot of political books. The more I read, the more I realized how much corruption there is in this world. So now I'm primed to fall for the teachings of the Jehovah's Witnesses. Now, one day, I'm 24 years old. I'm in my home, a home that I owned with my brother-in-law, Benny. He lived upstairs. I lived downstairs. I'm in my living room. From the age of 17 to the age of 24, believe me, I was searching for God. But I would never read anything that was fiction. I used to like to read about different cultures, the Incas, the Aztecs. I would like to read about all the cultures in America, Africa, Asia. I had a book in my hand all the time. Now, let me remind you, my nickname was Crazy Dave, but there was nothing crazy about me. It's maybe that I knew too much. And one day, Benny comes into my house. He comes home from work, and he has this book in his hand. And he tells me, Dave, the theories of evolution are like pseudoscience. He didn't say it that way, but that's what it was. And I wasn't really a true believer of evolution because I've always questioned that, like, how does a book like this evolve into a book like this without you showing me the proof? I can never buy that story. So I couldn't buy the story of how one animal became a different species. So he comes in with this book. We talk for a little bit, and he says to me, Dave, you want to read it? When I started to read this book, I couldn't put it down. I'm not a fast reader. I'm a slow reader because I think a lot. But I read the book like in 2 days. And as he walked out of the living room, he says to me, hey, Dave, the people behind this book are going to pay me a visit. So I was expecting this visit. I was expecting this visit over the next week or so. One day I'm in my backyard, I'm raking. Benny's upstairs, and my daughter Natalie comes to the back door and says, Dad, 2 men came to the door and went upstairs to speak to Uncle Benny. I said, oh, it must be the people behind the book. Did man get here by evolution or by creation? Oh, but let me also, it just came to mind. When I was in high school, somebody dropped a pamphlet. A Jehovah's Witness dropped a pamphlet on my lunch tray as I probably stepped out to go to the bathroom. And when I came back, I picked up that pamphlet. And I could tell you that I read it from beginning to end. I couldn't put it down. It was about how Adam and Eve lost paradise and how God was planning to regain it or bring it back. And when I finished the pamphlet, I looked at it. Who published this? I'm saying to myself, Watchtower Bible Tract Society of Pennsylvania. published by Watchtower Bible Tract Society of New York, Inc. It's a business. And I was a little disappointed that it didn't say the Roman Catholic Church, because I've never read anything so nice or presented a picture of what God had plans for the earth. Now I finished reading this book, and I want to talk to these two gentlemen, because I'm saying they're onto something. They're onto something that I appreciated 100%. So I go upstairs. I sit like I'm sitting here. Benny's sitting there. Tom Owens is sitting there. Tom Owens, God bless his soul. And Douglas Haywood is standing next to Tom Owens. And I got involved in the conversation. And after about 10 minutes of talking, Tom Owens looks at me and he says, Dave, you look to be like I don't know if he said spiritual or religious person. And I said, I should be. My mother was very religious, and my grandmother was super religious. And I believe in God. I didn't say I believe in the Roman Catholic Church or anything like that, but I was expressing myself that I do believe in God, and that I did have an upbringing in the Roman Catholic Church. So Tom Owens says to me, David, can we say the Lord's Prayer? And I said, sure. Then he says to me, you say it. He tells me to say the Lord's Prayer. So I got up and I bowed my head and I said, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. When I hear Tom say, stop. So I open my eyes and I look at Tom, and he says, do you know what the word hallowed means? My God, I said to myself, I found that question. That question to me caused my brain to blow up, because I realized that as a Catholic, I said the Lord's Prayer maybe 1,000,000 times. And that moment in time, I realized that I didn't know the definition of hallowed. How could you be saying a prayer and you don't know the definitions of the word that you're using? But it's because as a Catholic, I said the Lord's Prayer part of a ritual. It was always 10 Our Fathers, 10 Hail Marys, 5 Our Fathers, 50 Hail Marys. When you pray when you pray like that, you're not praying from the heart. You're just repeating a bunch of words. And I realized when he asked me that question, I said, whoa. The next question that followed really caused my brain to go nuclear. It went nuclear. The next question, he tells me, Dave, the word hallowed means to sanctify. I thought for a second, I said, wait a minute. I realized that in Spanish, you say, Padre nuestro que estás en el cielo, santificado sea su nombre. So I said to myself, wait a minute. I might not have known the definition of the word in English, but in Spanish, I definitely knew the definition of the word, but yet I never paid attention to the word. Because when you're a Catholic, you pray like that. You just go on and on and on and on. Our Father, our Father, our Father. So when he told me, this is the next question that followed, that caused my brain to go nuclear. He says to me, David, now that you know that Jesus said, Our Father who art in heaven, let your name be sanctified. The question that followed was, What name? Listen to this. What name was Jesus Christ telling the people that he was teaching? What name was it that he wanted you to sanctify? Oh my God. I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. My brain went back all the way to first grade in Catholic school. And in my mind, I'm saying to myself, that should have been the first thing I should have learned on the first day that I walked into the Catholic school, into the classroom. Sister Maria should have said, we are here to learn who is the God of the Bible, Jehovah God. He's the Father and God of our Lord Jesus Christ. I should have been calling upon Jehovah all my life. But they hide that name. And I give thanks to Tom Owens for waking me up. You know how many times God names appear in the Bible? 6,900 plus times in the Old Testament. 6,900 plus. I think it's 6,964. Close to 7,000 times. I never heard a priest, a nun, a fellow Roman Catholic ever speak to me and address God the Almighty by his name. So when Tom Owens asked me this question, what name did Jesus was telling the people to sanctify God's name. And yet you don't hear God's name nowhere. You don't hear it on the television. All these evangelists on television, they never sanctify God's name. The Pope never sanctifies God's name. No one does. So I thought for 44 out of 46 years that these people had the truth. I thought I had the truth because I spent all my life, or the last 46 years, trying to educate people that God the Almighty, the God of the Bible, is Jehovah God. Now, trust me, I'm no longer Jehovah's Witness. And I'm going to make a video explaining why. But look how easy it is to become a Jehovah's Witness. The book that I first studied, so after Tom Owens asked me these two questions that blew my mind, I agreed to take a Bible study with him. And you know something? I have no regrets. I know that I'm going to die one day worshiping Jehovah. And every time I pray to Jehovah, I'm going to see Jesus Christ right there. He's my lawyer. He's my lawyer when it comes to confessing my sins to God. He's my mediator. Paul said, for there's one God and one mediator. The only mediator in the universe between men and God is Jesus Christ. So I'm grateful that my studies of the Bible have educated me at least to that point. But this is how they catch you. You see this? I'm going to read you remember, I began this video by saying that I no longer believed in religion. I also believed in saying that I didn't believe in the political structure on this planet. But when you sit down with a Jehovah's Witness, they will tell you, okay, David, turn to Revelation 21:4. And you know what you would read? You will read this in the Bible, by the way. He will wipe out every tear from their eyes, and death will be no more. Neither would mourning, nor outcry, nor pain be any more. Revelation 21:4. Read it for yourself. If you're a Catholic, read it. Open up the book. To me, that was good news. An old man becomes young. A crippled young girl starts to run. Isaiah 35:6. The lame will leap like a deer. I never heard this in Catholic school. I never hear this on these preachers on TV. Isaiah 35:5. The eyes of the blind will be opened. And this is all good news. This was so refreshing for me. I finally was opening up the Bible and finding out what the Bible talks about. It's a woman with a big smile, a graveyard behind her. All those in the memorial tombs will come out. The dead will come back to life. John 5, chapter 5, 28, 29. In God's kingdom, no resident will say, I am sick. Tell me this ain't good news. A nice little picture of a mountain and a field with grain. And it says there will be an abundance. There will be an abundance of grain on the earth. Psalm 72:16. Here I am for the first time opening up the Bible. And you know what I realized? I don't care if it's a New World Translation of the Holy Scriptures. I don't care. I don't care if it's a King James Version of the Bible, the American Standard, the New World International Bible. I don't care what Bible you have. 99% of all Bibles are the same. They might twist the scriptures, and I'll talk about that at another time, to accommodate their narrative or their biased teachings. But one thing I noticed when I would sit down with Tom Owens and study the Bible was that as a Catholic, and I don't mean to offend Catholics, my mother was a Catholic, and I think that God loves my mother, and I think my mother's going to be resurrected. My grandmother was a devout Catholic, and I think God loves my grandmother too, dearly. She was a wonderful woman. She was very close to nature. And I know that if my grandmother can't make it to God's kingdom here on earth, nobody is. But as a Catholic, though, and I know there's a lot of good Catholics out there that don't practice sin. This is all Jesus wanted us to understand, to know who God is, who He is, and for us to not practice sin. I would have learned this in the first grade if the Roman Catholic Church would have told us, bring this book to class. This book is not required at all in Catholic school. When Catholics go to church, this book is not required. Could you imagine this? You belong to an organization or religion that proclaims to be God's representative on earth, and this book is not required when you go to church or when you go to their schools? In fact, there was a time in Europe that if you were to have the Greek Septuagint translated into German, French, English, Spanish, and the Roman Catholic Church knew that this was happening in a certain town, that town was doomed to destruction. The people will be burned to death. They'll be executed. This book at one time was forbidden among Catholics. So by the time I was 24 years old, I'm looking for God. I don't believe in government. And I come across a religious organization that at least aided me, helped me to understand what's in this Bible. Now, once again, I'm going to emphasize the point. I'm no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses because I think that Jehovah's Witnesses is a cult. The same way I think that the Mormons are a cult. The same way I think that most religions are a cult. Most religions become totalitarian. They start to look over your shoulder. You can't move without them calling you into the office or the back room. Oh, Mr. Vasquez, or this or that or this. So this is how I became a Jehovah's Witness. But on my next video, I'm going to talk to you on how and why I left the organization. And today I believe in Jehovah God and Jesus Christ as much as ever. In fact, I know that I will go to my grave believing in God the Almighty and His beloved Son, His only begotten Son, because that's who I worship. And I want to thank you if you took the time to listen to this video. And I want to thank the studio that provided me with this time. And God bless. And I'll see you later.